Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. And in this video, we are going to be continuing the modular environment modeling series in Blender. So I'm going to open up Blender real quick. And in the last video, we prepared both of the components we made, the wall and the column. Or actually, we just prepared the wall for a substance painter. And we UV'd it, so now it's complete and ready to be textured. So when you're preparing a model to be imported into Painter, you want to make sure that your materials are all in order. So in this tab here, we can see there's only one material, and that's what I want. So this whole wall is going to fall in this 0 to 1 UV space, and I'm fine with that. But if you wanted to make it super detailed, you would need more than one material with multiple UV islands in their own different texture coordinate planes. So there's an option to add more materials if you wanted to. But I'm fine with just this one modular wall material. So with that being said, I'm going to go into the files of my game, or actually this assets folder that's separate from my game, and I'll make a new folder. So 4x sci-fi wall or maybe modular sci-fi wall kit. Alright, honestly, I'll call it exactly what it is. Alright, cool. So I'm going to take this and export it. And the reason I'm being so careful naming is because eventually we're going to have all these different walls and columns, a lot of different varieties. So you want to make sure you know what's what. 4x sci-fi wall with I need to explain somehow that there's a window in the wall. Alright, honestly, whatever. So that's gonna do it. I already have Substance Painter open up. So I'll open up a new model. Alright, cool. So I believe all of the planes are facing the right way. I think I already checked that. And I want to make sure it stays consistent with the floor piece that we made in the first two videos. So I'm going to drag in that same plastic glossy smart material. And I'll set the color to roughly the same. Alright, that looks pretty good. And I'm going to make a folder for the base. So basically, this is the base. If there were no other details, this is just the base components that this wall piece is made out of. So it's obviously also going to need steel. So the steel is on top of the plastic. So I'm going to add a black mask, and I'll use the UV chunk fill. And I'll fill in all of these chunks that are corresponding with the window. And then I'll go into the mesh fill and fill in that bar. Alright, that looks good. Next, I'll grab some rubber Probably go back into the chunk fill. So it's kind of hard to decide what parts you want to be certain materials. It's always a little bit tricky because it's more of a design choice than anything. So I'm going to go inside of there. And then I want to erase these things on the outside. All right. All right, so that does it for the rubber there. But I do want to add some rubber, I believe here. Yep. So I know it can be confusing to try to use the UV chunk fill, but if you unwrapped your mesh yourself and didn't use the smart UVs, it should be pretty clear where everything is and what everything represents, and that makes it pretty easy to just select certain parts. Alright, so now I'm going to make another folder for pipes, and I'll drag in another plastic glossy stand, add a black mask, go into the mesh fill, and I'll go ahead and select all the pipes. Alright, and now I could drop it in here, add a white mask, and then sort of do that. Then I'll just go in here and invert the mask. Grab the steel. And we can just put the steel underneath all of these pipe materials pretty quickly. Well, this is pretty annoying. All right, there we go, finally. Alright. So last but not least, put the steel behind this. Alright, looks pretty good. So now we want the steel everywhere else that it's supposed to be. Alright, so I think that concludes masking out all of the base materials. The only thing I might do is change this pipe color to like some type of darker red. I think that looks good. Also, I think the base plastic is a bit too dirty. So, I did not mean to change that blending mode. But the dust can stay at full opacity. But I just think the stains need to be reduced. Alright, and that looks pretty good. So I'll save this. Alright, that works. And now let's go ahead and bake this mesh map. So I'll bake it at 4K because I'll probably export this at 4K in the end. And we don't need a high poly because just the way I made this, it's high res enough that with the high level of geometry combined with the face weighted normals, it doesn't really need a high poly mesh. The curves and everything look smooth enough. So it's a pretty quick workflow and you don't have to make a high poly mesh. Alright, so now we can start to see that that's too much dust. So we'll lower it down to something like 17. Also, I want to lighten up the rubber a little bit in some spots. Maybe just the whole thing. Alright, yeah, something like that. And this steel is a little strange. It seems way too worn out. So I'm going to keep the scratches. But what I'll do is lighten up the metal enough and lighten the scratches enough that it doesn't look so pronounced. So the scratches are fully metallic. I want to make it very rough as well. Or no, not very rough. And as far as this goes, pretty rough, or pretty metallic and smooth as well. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I also want to try out another metal smart material just to see what it would look like. And I mean, that isn't bad either. Obviously, a bit too dirty. So if I copied this steel mask and I put it in there, then I drag this down with it, it's like, which one do I like better? Alright, so I think I like the steel dark aged. So I'll stick with that. I do think it's a little too shiny, so I'll tone that down a little bit. And perfect. That's exactly what I want. All right, so the base is now all done, I believe. So now what I'll do is make a new folder, and I'll call this height information. So now I'm going to go in and find some procedurals that I think would fit the look I'm going for here. I'm looking for some type of line pattern. All right, so that might work. So what I'll do is I'll drop this into the height. Get rid of all of the other material channels, and I'll scale this up in the UV transformations until I think it's good. I'll call this, I don't know, zigzag. Add a black mask. And I'll put it on the rubber. We're about up there. All right, no, I don't want to do it there. So, okay, that looks good. It looks a little too pronounced. So what I'll do is I'll add a levels. And okay, I want to add a levels on the actual material itself. You can see in the affected channels right now it's affecting the base color, so that won't do anything because there is no base color. But I'll change it to height. And you can see, you can just drag this around. So we can make it a subtract and add. Or we can just scale it down so it's bumping out but just not very much so. Also, I don't like this here, so I'm going to try to move it around a bit and see what we can do. Alright, that's not too noticeable, so I'll take that. Okay. So it's not bad. Next up, I'm going to start looking at alphas. And this is definitely a long process, trying to texture something from start to finish, but I'll see if I can do it all in this video. Alright, so I want to make some holes. So what I'll do is I'll only have the height map, and I'll darken the color a little bit, but I'll lower the opacity greatly. And I'll drag the height all the way down. And then I'll go ahead and add a black mask, and I'll pick this as my alpha. So now wherever I paint, we'll start getting these holes. So that looks pretty good. All right. So I'll just try to space these out pretty evenly. All right, cool. And on to the next alpha. All right, I think that might be a little much. So what I can do is either turn down the flow to something not as extreme. I just want to see what this would look like if I turn this around and do the same pattern. It's not bad. It's definitely not bad. I think I just feel like the flow's a little strong. So I'll turn down the flow to something like 10. And we can try this again. All right, that looks pretty good. And normally what I would do is have the symmetry modifier going, but it doesn't matter since the UVs are only on one side anyways. So we essentially have the symmetry modifier on anyways. All right, so there we go with that. Doesn't look too bad. And I just am going to put it there as well. All right, cool. Next, I'm going to go back to the dots. and that's too strong. I'll go down to 20. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm just continuing to add more details without trying to overdo it. And that's really the big thing. Sometimes when you overdo it, just doesn't look real. So definitely I try not to overdo things. Sometimes there's just too much going on. Okay, I missed the metal right here. Now we'll go back to the height information. All right, so now it's time to detail these bolts. I think I want the width a little bit more narrow. That's too much flow though. 25 should be better. I wonder if there's a better, more high-tech design, because that looks a little dated. Maybe this. Sure. All right, so I like where we're at. But maybe it could use a little more. And this is really just me messing around, seeing what I like and what I don't like. That's really all it is. There's a lot you can mess around with in Painter. There's tons and tons of options. You can do almost anything as far as texturing goes. So yeah, there's a lot of alphas to mess around with. And you can get some pretty cool results. So I might push it in here a little bit. And maybe on these sides. I think that might be a little too much though. Maybe in each corner. And then maybe one like that. Alright, I think that all looks pretty good. Alright, so I like that. So now what I'll do is create a layers, and I'll call it normals. So now the only thing that we want to affect is the normals, and I'll go into hard surface, and we can start adding some normal detail. I'm going to bump the hardness all the way up. So I might put a handle here. And I'll probably do most of these normals at 100% opacity, just because they're not as strong as changing the height channel. The normal is a little different. You know, it doesn't actually pull in anything or push it out. It just affects the way that light interacts with the texture. So we can go a little more strong with the normal. I think it usually gives a better result. Whereas going strong with the height map can sometimes look a little too overwhelming. Alright, looks pretty good. Oh, that's right, we were in erase mode. Okay. That makes sense why that wasn't working. Okay, we'll drag in a handle next. Yeah, I think I like that a little bit better. And then I'll just drag the normal around this way. This cabinet piece is sort of what it looks like. So yeah, that's not bad. So I'm throwing a little bit of detail into all these corner pieces. Just a little bit. I'm wondering if these might look better than that. I'm gonna erase this. And throw on this instead. There's a lot of decisions to make for sure. How does this one look? I think I like that. Still a little much. Alright, that's actually perfect. Because it's not too much, it's not too noticeable, which is good with modular stuff. So you can't easily pick out that it's so repetitive. So you usually don't want, you want to be discreet when you make things modular, because if you don't, people will easily be able to see the repetitions, and that's never good. I think I should use another normal for that. Maybe this one. Yeah, that's much better. Alright, pretty good. And now I want to grab a longer normal, maybe like that. Alright, that's not bad. Then put some vents across the top of this. Let me see if I can get away with doing one in the middle. Alright, yeah, it took a couple tries, but there we go. And that looks pretty good. Alright, now let's call this height subtract, because we are pushing the details in, and that way I know what that layer is referring to. And I'm going to go back to alpha, grab these dots again, and I just want to put a couple bigger holes in the pipe. Alright, that looks good. So we have the base and we have the height and normal information. So at this point, I'm going to add another layer for smart masks, and let's save this quickly. And I'm going to make a top layer called AO for ambient occlusion. So I'll add in the AO channel, get rid of everything except AO, and I'll put in the ambient occlusion. And that was the map that we got from baking out the model. So yep, there's our AO. And I'll drag this into smart mask. And in the smart mask, what I'm going to do is take sand. And if sand's too strong, I can do sand cavities or maybe just occlusion strong. But what this is just a darker color that I want to sort of fill in some gaps with. So I'll add another layer, occlusion strong, put in like a dark brown, get rid of every channel except color, and lower the opacity to like 10, just for a bit of color variation. And we'll do stain scratches. I'm actually going to do that per material. So in the steel, I'll add a fill layer. And do stain scratches. And I'll look at the window and go into mask editor. And here we can lower or raise the amount of scratches we want. So in the global contrast, I can sort of lower that, give it more of a blur. We can say whether we want to use curvature or anything like that. There's no need to use AO. You can say more of one texture or another, which is pretty cool. I think it looks good with a little less curvature. Alright. So now I'm going to lower that, the base color, turn the roughness down, and metallic up. Alright, so that's pretty good for some scratches. And the last place that I want scratches is on the pipes. And I think that looks good as it is, but down here you can see it's a little much. Metallic is going to go up. What I could do is say that I don't want to affect the metallic at all. So only the roughness and the color. Then I can scale down the color opacity as well. So even the color isn't really changing, and then only affect the roughness. And that looks pretty good. So I think I'm about done texturing this. I'm going to give it a quick render in iRay just to make sure everything looks okay. So yeah, I think that looks just about like what I wanted and what I was hoping for. So yeah, I'll go ahead and export these textures. So file, export textures, and I want it in the Unity HD render pipeline, of course. And I'll just export into this folder at a resolution of 4K. So that's going to take a minute or so. So I want to take a second to say thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for the support so far on these videos. It's been amazing to see. And I'm going to keep going. There's a lot more content that I have. And there's a lot to get done as I continue working on this game. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. And I will see you all soon.